We're happy to welcome you all here to our headquarters. And for some of you, perhaps you are new. Perhaps many of you have been coming for years in order to strengthen your ties with the great ones and with the gurus. This is a time of spiritual rejuvenation, a time of drawing closer to God the Father and to the Divine Mother. Our Guru has said to us, "A steady stream of divine power will flow to you, for the great ones have sent me here. When I am gone, you will realize this truth with greater impact. I am here only to deliver their message. Little by little, a spiritual change will come to the true followers of this path, and their influence will spread over the world. Self-realization is one of the greatest spiritual movements ever sent to help mankind. It has been blessed by the great ones, Mahavatar Babaji, Lahiri Mahashai, Sri Yukteswar, in communion with Christ and Krishna. The grace of these masters is not gone from the earth. They are waiting to help you and to help the world." Realization doesn't come overnight, does it? If any of you have found it so, raise your hand. We have to enjoy the journey, don't we? So many things are coming into our world today. Everything seems to be speeded up, doesn't it? And our problems seem to be speeded up, whether we like it or not, and most of us don't, do we? But we realize also at the same time how much we are gaining from the challenges that we must meet every day. These are meant to strengthen us, to teach us as to the real purpose for which we are here. I've talked to many of you before, I think, about Master and the days that we knew him here at Mother Center. I was introduced to the self-realization teachings and to Master unexpectedly. In the fall of 1945, I had intuited something coming into my life, and these things had happened before, and I finally thought, I know something, but I don't know what I need to know. And then I said, "Lord, if you exist, I dare you to prove it to me." And this was a very strong, powerful demand, I would say. I thought, well, at once I felt an unseen presence full of humor. And I didn't think I liked that. And I said, "Don't laugh, I mean business." And the feeling I got back was, all right, if that's what you want. So much for, for our own free will. Well, I thought, well, that was rather an unusual occurrence, and I thought I'll just put this one in the back of my mind and lock it up for the next 40 years, and then we'll see what comes next. But 2 weeks following that, a friend came by and simply said, "Let's go to Hollywood." I didn't want to go to Hollywood. I remember thinking, am I destined to live my life doing things I don't really want to do? It seemed so. What will we do in Hollywood? Well, I never dreamed that we would be going to a church, Self-Realization Fellowship Church. And when my friend told me the name, I thought, well, what does it mean? And I thought that, well, perhaps there would be a philosophical minister discussing some kind of philosophical thoughts about religion and so forth. But when Master appeared and I saw him, I thought, this is no ordinary being. This man knows God. And you know that, you feel it. You feel in the very atmosphere, every atom is charged with that divine presence. It's extraordinary. I often think, how can you explain omniscience to anyone? He knew our every thought, every feeling, where we had come from, where we were going. Thank goodness someone knew. But after that first introduction there at the Hollywood Temple, I didn't meet him that day, but I knew when I left the building, the temple, that I was walking out physically, but not otherwise. I'll backtrack here a few years to my teen years when I was growing up. Periodically, every 2 or 3 years, I would draw a pair of brown eyes, and not the face, but just eyes. And in those eyes, I would try to create an expression of eternity. And my concentration sometimes would be so one-pointed that it was as though they came alive for me. They were real. I used to search for them whenever this would happen in my growing up years, but I never saw anyone with eyes like those eyes. And then when I saw Master, I saw such eyes. I thought, what is such a great soul doing here in such a small temple with ordinary people like myself? Where is the world? Don't they know who's here? And I remember building mentally a cathedral for him. It's a good thing it was mental, because it became so large that such a construction would not have been possible. So I abandoned my plans then and there and thought, only the sky can be the roof of his temple. And isn't it true, when you think of it, he has devotees the world over. And so in truth, only the sky can be the roof of the temple of those that really belong to God. But when I heard him that first time, I never thought that I would be so privileged as to know him. That just didn't seem possible. In fact, I didn't spend any time reflecting on it. He simply said that we should take the teachings and live according to the precepts of those teachings. And so I filled out a little form requesting the free literature that we had in those days. You couldn't pick it up in the temples as you can today. You had to send for it, you see. So I continued my life, but I realized that my heart, mind, and soul were a part of his teachings, a part of everything he had talked about. And so it was difficult to go back to school the next day after hearing him speak that first time. And I thought, will this week ever end? It's 1,000 years long. And when I got back to the temple the following Sunday, one of his disciples was speaking. And at first I thought, oh. And then immediately I felt, never mind. listen to what he has to say. And so I did. Master came again the next week, next Sunday. He was alternating at that time between San Diego Temple and Hollywood Temple. And I took my sister that time. And I think she was just a little bit frightened of him because she felt, I'm sure, that he could see into you, you know. And there's no question about that. But he didn't let that be known. The third time, they say, is charm. I went alone. I went to the temple early because I wanted to just sit there in the peace. I was still waiting for the free literature to come. Every day I would look for that in the mail. And so I'd walk down about 20 feet of the walkway leading to the temple, and I had the impulse to turn around. And there he stood. He was wearing an overcoat over his robe. And he was just standing there on the sidewalk characteristically. And that gaze was so eternal. No one else was around. And I remember willing myself to walk on and not to bother him. I reached the entrance to the temple, turned around, he was gone. And when I was inside the temple, I just lost myself in the peace. I didn't know how to meditate. I had never heard of gurus, disciples, yoga. Those things were, in my time, very new. Today, our young people are very aware of Eastern teachings, Eastern thought. And when Master spoke later during his lecture, he made two announcements. One was that if you did not have family obligations, you could come to Mother Center here, headquarters, to serve God. And I remember it was as though a door opened unseen within me. I didn't know what it meant. And the second announcement was that the next day they would have an 8-hour meditation in honor of Christ. And I thought, well, now I've been coming here these 3 times, first with a friend, then with my sister, and now I'm alone. I have spoken to no one. I don't know where the headquarters is, where this meditation will take place. I would like to go, but I'm not qualified. I'm not a member. I don't know how to meditate. I'm a very reasonable creature, you see. I put all this out of my mind, I thought, until a little bit after 9 o'clock that Monday morning. The meditation was scheduled to start at 10, and suddenly I had this overwhelming desire to come. Just overwhelming. And I thought, but this is ridiculous. I've thought this through from A to Z and back again several times over. It's absurd to go to a place for an 8-hour meditation when you don't know anything about meditation. But the feeling was there, and it was overwhelming. And I thought, but it's too late. I can't go there now. I don't know where it is. The thought went through my mind, call your brother. And I argued. I always argue, you see. And I thought, but he's probably working, and besides, he'll think, wow, strange that she waited so late to call. But I did call. And he was standing right by the phone. And I said to him, I have to go somewhere and be there by 10 o'clock. Where is it? The only thing I had to go by was a leaflet I had picked up at Hollywood Temple, advertising autobiography of a yogi. And the address was all I had to give him. Oh, he said, I know where that is, and he hung up. Knowing him, he had the keys in his pocket. He simply walked out to his car, and he lived in Burbank. I lived off Sunset and Silver Lake. We did not have the freeway system in those days, but my brother didn't need a freeway system. If you ever drove with him to Texas, you would never forget him. Well, he picked me up in record time, and we very swiftly came here. I remember here on the crest of this second hill, I don't know where I got this from, but I wondered if there would be yogis in suspended animation here. If there were, I didn't see them. But soon he said, here's Self-Realization Fellowship, and almost immediately we were through the gate and driving swiftly along this roadway. He let me out at the steps there at the porch and was gone. A few minutes till 10 o'clock. And I often think the Lord chose his driver well. And then I thought, now I wonder if anyone will discover this strange person here in their midst. I went inside, stood over by the double doors of the library, and many of our members were there from the Hollywood Temple. But at one point, there was a division between the people, some on this side, some on that side. I looked up and I saw him standing in front of the chapel. There was something about him, his presence was so noticeable. You couldn't miss it. And then he turned and went inside. After he gave the opening prayer, he said, if you don't know how to meditate, sit with a straight spine. And he gave instructions. Thank goodness. I followed them very carefully for those 8 hours. And through the grace of God and Guru, I made it through. Then at the end, he gave the closing prayer, and I thought that very naturally he would go away, he would disappear. We stood there for a long, long time. And finally, I thought, well, I wonder what's happening. So I opened my eyes, and he was blessing the man just ahead of me, and I was next. Amazing timing, isn't it? And I had two reactions to him. One was that of a 3-year-old child that had lost both earth parents and was finding the real parents in the form of the Guru. The other was an adult reaction to him as one you could revere, respect, deeply respect for who he was and what he was. And by then he was blessing me, and then he said, I want to see you. I still hadn't spoken to anyone, and I didn't say anything to him. Not necessary. But as I walked from the chapel to the fireplace, I remember thinking, you've always known that you would know him. Why didn't you acknowledge this? But then, in time, I realized that Master had a way of removing himself from your consciousness and leaving you to deal directly with God. He did not wish us to adore him as a personality at all. I stood there for a moment at the fireplace, and Sri Daya Mata came and led me back to him. I didn't say anything to her. She said, "You must be the tall girl Master's asking for." She turned as though she had answered her own question, and I followed her into the chapel. Master was sitting there in the back. His eyes were so beautiful and so alive and so full of humor. I think it must be humorous to be able to view us all back, through lifetime after lifetime. It must be extraordinary. And then I had what I called my kind of experience. I don't normally have them, except on special occasions. And as I stood before him, it was as though 100,000 unseen veils were being swiftly pulled back. And a voice of silence said to me, "You've always wondered if anyone exists who's beyond human limitation, beyond anger, greed, selfishness, etc." And it's true, I had wondered. I think from the time I was about 8, I used to think, isn't there anyone qualified to help us here? And then the voice said, "I am Yogananda." And then qualified that by saying Yogananda has become me. And then it was finished. It was over. It was just a little interlude to tell me who he was and is, and that this is an eternal journey. So there's never been one iota of question in my mind about who he is for me and what our relationship is. And he was watching this experience that I was having. He knew what I was experiencing, and I knew he knew what I was experiencing. Omniscience is something that is not easily understood, but he knew your every thought, how you were feeling, what was going on. He knew. And then he said to me, "You've come." And I said, "Yes, sir." No question in my mind. I didn't know anything about the fellowship or how it, shall we say, operated and things of that type. But I didn't really think about that. Does that make sense? He was rather like the universe, all-knowing, all-perceiving. And the love he had for every soul who came to him, wondrous, extraordinary, pure, like the light from heaven. I often thought, I don't know if you all remember the Olympics we had, and they had on a tall, very tall pedestal, a circular disc in which oil evidently had been poured, and someone shot a flaming arrow into this disc, and it was immediately ablaze, the flame. And I thought of Master in that sense, being represented by this flame. And we're like little matchsticks. You bring us a little closer to that great power, and we also ignite, because that same soul substance is within each of us. And so he came, you might say, to touch on that with each one. And he's doing that with you today. You can't escape. Isn't that great? He asked me about my family and about what I was doing at the time. And following the end of the Second World War in May of that year, I wasn't certain what to do with my life, so I went to art school for the first time. And so I told him I was going to art school, and he said, "Art school?" And I thought, oh, I knew that was a mistake. I suppose in previous lives I'd had quite a lot of activity in that area, and it's like chocolate cake. You can get too much, you see. So you don't want really to go back. But he was so thoughtful about everything. I remember when we talked about my entering the ashram, and he said at one point, "Where is your sister?" And I said, "Well, right now she's in Texas with her family, with her parents." "Oh," he said, "you'd better not come until she comes back. She will be shocked to come back and find you gone." He was so thoughtful, so perceptive, do you see, knowing how others would feel if you did something very unusual while they're gone. Well, he invited me to the Christmas banquet and also to his birthday. So I didn't know what to bring to Master for his birthday. And I thought, well, I finally decided that roses were something that would express my loyalty and my devotion that I felt in my soul. As a child, we always had a rose garden. And early on, the white roses for me were a symbol of purity, and the red a symbol of devotion and loyalty. And I had no idea that Master used roses for his special ceremonies. But my sister, as I've mentioned, was in Texas, and she was helping me go to art school at that time. I went to the florist and ordered a dozen roses, only to find I was short of the money required. And I thought, well, what can I do? I ordered a half-dozen roses. And then I fussed and feathered around about all of that, you see, for days thereafter. I think the Lord got rather bored with that. Because how can you give a half-dozen of anything to your guru? Impossible. Anyway, I was resigned, so I went there to pick up the half-dozen roses. And the lady said, "They're a little bit short, and for $1 more, I will give you a full dozen." So I had my dozen roses. And in these little ways, you know that God is aware and responding to your needs. So I came and handed the roses to him. He was greeting his guests. And I think it was 2 weeks later, I had my only interview with him before I entered, which was just a little bit more than a month after I met him. And when I came, I was ushered into his library. And there was an old roll-top desk there. And on that desk were these beautiful red roses. They caught my attention. And Master entered. He missed nothing. And then he noticed that I was looking at the roses, and he said, "God has kept them for me." And those were the roses I had given to him for his birthday. It's difficult to describe Master with just mere words. I would say that his consciousness was vast, eternal. It was beyond the comprehension of the average person. He was ever changing, ever new. The feeling you had in his presence, but he was moving in the heavens, not fixed as we are normally in our personalities and habit patterns. He was therefore eternal, but he was changeless, ever-changing but changeless in essence. And he was extraordinarily well-balanced, very practical. And of course, his unity with God was fixed, shall we say. That was his legacy, his inheritance, and what he had come to help us to achieve. Again, I think I've already said I would liken him into the universe because he was at once everything to us. He was the father, the mother, the friend, the beloved, the child. He was very charming, delightful, humorous, but simple, humble, childlike, spontaneous, and free. Always concerned for the welfare of others. It was wonderful to watch him with people. He overlooked no one. And he would spend hours talking to people who waited in line, one after the other, to see him. So patient. And if it took all night long to do this, he did it. Do you see? Nothing was weighed or measured or withheld. He gave freely of himself, wherever he was, to whomever he was with. I always thought Master's face was the most perfect face I ever beheld. And photographs don't do him justice because they didn't pick up the planes in his face or always the fineness of his features. I remember mentioning this to Taramata once. She, as you will remember, is the one who edited Master's autobiography of a yogi and also other books. And she said it took several incarnations of inner effort to perfect those spiritual qualities necessary to manifest such outward perfection. As a man thinketh, so is he. We're all people, aren't we? I think. But how different we are in appearance. Well, in those early days for me, life was much simpler here. And though life was simple, still, Master, wherever he was, there was always an immense amount of activity. Why? He had a lot of work to accomplish before he left this earth plane, and he knew that. When he would come here from Encinitas, he would be scheduled to give the morning service there at Hollywood Temple, and he and the devotees who were traveling with him would arrive maybe about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And I used to wake up and I'd think, is he here? There was something about the atmosphere in the building. You felt as though it had risen about at least 3 or 4 feet, just because he was here. And early on, when I was quite new on the path, someone would come to my door and tell me that Master was asking for me. So I would go downstairs to the main hall, and he would greet me and bless me. And then I would sit on one side of the main hall, and he would sit on the other with the monks. He spent as much time as he could with the monks, but he was so busy with so many projects. And he literally gave his life, every moment of it, to all of us, in one form or the other. But there he sat till 5 o'clock in the morning. And I remember once he came over and He said, I'm so sorry that you had to sit here by yourself. And I said, but sir, I haven't been by myself. His presence was so great. You were enveloped in that presence. Whether you were seated just next to him or across the room, there was no difference. He was so much within. Then about 5 o'clock in the morning, he would go to his apartment upstairs, and he would rest the physical form consciously. And then from 7 to 11, he had his own meditation, during which time he worked with souls here in this world, as well as in the astral spheres. So you see, he was constantly busy in one way or the other, helping people on every level of life. We cannot conceive of how much he did. Another incredible blessing for me was that Master assigned me to be the first secretary to Sri Daya Mata. And I had no knowledge of offices or of being a secretary. But one thing is for certain, she was and has been for me and others close to her the most perfect example of what true discipleship entails. She was always so fair and so honorable in everything that she did and whatever she handled. She did it with care, caring. And this is what you could see Master doing, constantly caring for souls, guiding them, helping them, each one according to his or her needs, karmically speaking. Ma's life was totally dedicated to God, to loving God, to serving God in every way possible. And in those early days, I remember one of the older disciples told us this. Master had said to them to follow Faye. And of course, in those days, she was Faye Wright, before we began to formalize our monastic vows. So one of them said to him, well, sir, what if she's wrong? He said, if she's wrong, I will correct it. So you can be certain that we're in very good hands still. He still looks after us no matter what. Our only responsibility is our attunement with him. During those last years of his life, I witnessed the fact that he turned this entire fellowship over to her, Sri Daya Mata. Everything that went on here and in India, wherever, was her responsibility. And she took it on. Rajasi, as you know, was our vice president until Master's passing. But afterward, when he was our president, he still had his business connections in Kansas City. He was very busy. A very quiet, solitary, quiet man. Said very little, but his presence spoke volumes. Ma kept in touch with him, and especially if anything of importance arose. But it was she who was really carrying on here, seeing to it that all the various aspects of this work was being carried on. She was already the captain of this ship when Master left us. in 1952. And it's interesting for me to look back over those years and to think of the training that he gave to her, and also to Mukti Mata, who is our vice president today. Daya took care of Master's correspondence. She recorded all his lectures, and I remember for years she had boxes of shorthand notebooks to transcribe. And she did them in her spare time, of which there was none. But we can be grateful today for Man's Eternal Quest, Divine Romance, and Journey to Self-Realization, as well as other writings. So the Lord does not leave us empty-handed, you understand. Master left special instructions with Ma in particular, and included her sister, Sri Anandamata, who is 2 years younger than she. Protecting a work as great as this requires divine dedication, pure divine dedication, and much hard work, willingness to work. Several times I overheard Master say to her that he wanted his lessons and his books, everything pertaining to him and to the mission that he's brought on earth, to be distributed here from his headquarters. And the reason for that is because there's a very great need to keep his words pure. He selected with great care those who edited his works. Taramata was the first, brilliant woman, and I many times saw her face sort of metamorphose into Master's. She really would look like him at times, especially when she was expounding the scriptures, Vedic truths that go back eons. And Mukti Mata, he trained especially too, to follow through in the same way later. It's not just a matter of language or knowing grammar. To be able to edit such works, you have to know his thoughts. You have to know what Master was trying to convey to all of us. Because he used to say those teachings will be, the lessons will be my voice when I am gone. And I'm sure you've all noticed this. I certainly have over the years. Anytime I'm reading something of Master's, it's as though he's actually speaking to me. Those words mean so much. There is life and living to them. I can read other writings about saints, etc., beautifully written, but the vibration is different. So that vibration must be maintained. And that was his reason for leaving those instructions with her. Anandama also played a very key role in Master's life. She was his driver, an excellent driver. She took care of his living quarters, his clothing, everything that pertained to him was kept in absolute perfect condition. And Shaimama, their mother, also had a role where Master was concerned. She frequently was sent to do public relations work, and she never failed. She had the charm of a queen, you see. And no one was ever too high or too low in status in this world. The King of Finland once came to Los Angeles, and one of our members who was from Finland invited her to go with her. So they went to the banquet, and it so amusing for me to learn that she ended up, Shy Mama, sitting by the king and taking care of his needs. She used to write letters to every president of the United States because she said they had a hard job. Letters of encouragement. So you and I are the beneficiaries today of this great legacy. Let us make the most of it. I often think that we owe so much to our beloved Sri Daya Mata for carrying on so nobly in Master's footsteps, endeavoring to carry out to the letter every particle of instruction he left behind. This to me is true discipleship. Master didn't approve of movies, generally speaking, and I think he certainly wouldn't approve of what goes on today, for the most part. But once in a while, he would take us to a cowboy Indian movie. He liked action. And when we were settled in the movie, he would go into samadhi. Now, Daya Ma and her sister Anandama were very much aware of Master's ways of handling life. So they would watch the movie when suddenly he would open his eyes and he would look at the screen and say, "What happened?" So they would fill him in on what had happened. And I remember once the cowboys and Indians were just getting a little bit out of hand from my point of view. And I thought, well, I'm going to close my eyes and think of Divine Mother until they finish this battle. Do you see? And there came a little tap on my knee. Daya Mata was sitting between him and me. And when I opened my eyes and looked, I could see him leaning forward and looking at me, his great eyes in the light of the film. And then he pointed to the film. No way to escape, do you see? I was to look not only at that kind of horror movie, but the things that take place in this world. You don't close your eyes to anything. He not only knew the art of discipline, but he knew the art of relaxation and of having fun. During my younger years, I really didn't see any real purpose in going to school. I was not a bad pupil, but I just wasn't that interested in what was going on. Does that make sense? I was always wondering what was the purpose of all of this. And I just couldn't see any immediate connection between what was being taught in school and the knowledge and skills that one would need to acquire in order later on to earn a living. In my time, women rarely worked outside the home. And so I was not thinking in terms of schooling. But after I came here, I realized how vital a very good education is, how helpful it is. And so I resolved one evening to really get some books and study them. Mathematics, whatever. A few days passed, and Master was leaving at the side entrance, going to Encinitas. He was engaged in a very in-depth talk with one of the monks, very concentrated. And we were all standing over to one side. And at one point, he simply turned his head, looked directly at me, and he said, "Books won't give you what you want." And I thought, oh, that was for me. Then he was right back on, he didn't miss a beat with this monk he was talking to. But everything he knew. You couldn't put a thing over on him at all. And it's still going on, do you see? Some of the devotees used to ask a lot of questions of Master, and somehow I never felt like doing that. I just didn't. And I used to think, well, you should ask something. But I didn't. I didn't do it. Because one day, while others were asking questions, I clearly heard him within my thoughts say, "Ask if you wish, but when you are ready, you will know the answers without having to ask." And as a result, I never ask. I still don't. But you know, and you know that you know. And he said to me also, "When you're alone, you will know I am with you." Master often talked to us about seclusion, about finding the time in our lives to be with God. Now that's difficult, isn't it? It's very difficult. I look back on the time when he was with us, and there was such activity. He never seemed to be active, but he was running a big show here, getting a lot done, more than we had any conception of. Just one tiny more story. I was standing in the drawing room in the Hermitage, and Master was getting ready to go out. No one else was nearby, and he was standing there, and you could almost feel and hear God talking to him. The consciousness was just so vast and so great, so etheric. And I stood there and I thought, just imagine, here I stand in the presence of a God-realized soul. And at one point, he just turned his head just a little. And I always said that his eyes would come around the corners, you know. He would look at you out of the side of his eyes. He knew what I was thinking. But he made no comment. Then moments later, he saw just a tiny white thread on the carpet about 10 feet away, maybe half an inch long, almost imperceptible. And he very kindly said, "Pick that up." And I did, of course. And later on, it came to me that every detail in life, every tiny detail, deserves time and attention. He missed nothing. He tended to the things that God wanted him to take care of. The rest, he observed, but knew in time it would all be taken care of by the Heavenly Father. It's been a joy to talk to you all. Let's chant just for a moment and we have our prayer. Heavenly Father, Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Bhagavan Krishna, Mahavatar Babaji, Lahiri Mahashai, Swami Sri Yukteswar, and our Gurudev, Paramahansa Yogananda, all saints, we bow to you all. May our Guru's guiding incomparable presence ever light our pathway, that we may be drawn ever onward and upward on the path of self-realization. Om. Peace. Amen.